Good evening and welcome to Right Now. I'd like to start the show by wishing a massive congratulations to Gareth and his wife Gemma on the safe arrival of their beautiful baby girl, Ophelia.
Hello, this is Ophelia and welcome to Right Now.
And they piloted this no jab, no job policy for the government. And because they knew that the whole establishment is behind them, it didn't matter what defence we were putting up, it was just getting ignored. And sadly, some workers were dismissed and are now having to take their case to an employment tribunal. But since the new laws come in, we've been having a lot more success. And that's because the new law cannot override the Equality Act.
Yeah.
And therefore, there must be exemptions. So, people think that this new law has been passed, it's made vaccination compulsory, all care home staff must be jabbed or they're out of a job. But no, it's not. It's not as simple as that. And just one line, if I could read,
Of course.
from the new Act, Section 5.2. I use this regularly in hearings because in hearings where they're trying to terminate a worker's contract, they often try and portray it as you either take the vaccine or you're going. It's simple as that. But this is what Section 5.2 says. It says, B has provided A with evidence that satisfies A that either B has been vaccinated with the complete course of doses of an authorized vaccine, or that for clinical reasons, B should not be vaccinated.
So when the minister made that statement, what was the reaction? You say people didn't take it seriously, but did they give any kind of reason for why they wanted to take away 50,000 Danish children? Was there any kind of, we're doing it for this reason, or did she just say it and move on?
They said that later, 3 months later, the Interior Minister and Social Minister, who is actually the one responsible, she said she was, somebody faced her and say, where did that number where did you get it from? And she said, but the 50,000 is only the alcoholic families. And then after the 50,000, we also need the one where there's violence in the families. And then after that, we want the one who is sexually violated inside the family. So, like, not the other way around, not starting with the one who is sexually violent and then the alcoholics, or the alcoholics in the last. And Denmark is famous for having a really bad alcoholic culture. We start very young drinking in the universities. They drink. The politicians, one politician is just getting out of politics because he's touching young girls. And I'm so sorry, we get very drunk when we are in political parties. So sometimes we are crossing lines. I'm so sorry, I better step out of politics. Yes, you really, all of you that is sitting in the Danish government should step out of politics.
It's great that people are, obviously there's a great awakening happening. And we're talking 2020, this whole thing was all about Q, right? Well, people always said, well, what do you make of Q? I say Q is like prophecy. Q is dropping things that I've been talking about for years, and people are starting to really believe it. And whether it's a mixture of intuition, people starting to put things together for themselves, becoming detectives, especially after the Epstein, suicide, it became more and more obvious that something is really off here. So when it comes to the blasé nature, I mean, it's like you and your father, you've been aware of these things for a long time. And I'm in a similar situation where, to me, things that were important and meaningful did not seem to resonate with a large audience until increasingly over time, over the last, few years, especially, more and more people seem to be waking up to this reality. And the trouble, of course, is it's not that the people in power are blasé, it's that they're compromised. We have a whole chapter devoted to that word, compromised, where if you're at a certain level of intelligence, a certain level of power and finance and influence, it's very difficult if you want to maintain your status. I mean, look at what we're seeing with the medical establishment. How few doctors are willing to speak out when it comes to the lies around this pandemic, right? I mean, it's like there are some brave doctors who are speaking their truth, but most of them will say to their colleagues, well, I don't want to get fired, or it's just I don't want to lose my grant money if you're a scientist, right? I mean, this is the nature of the business we're in. If people don't understand how compromised and how compromised the whole system is, in a sense, if you want to have power, think about the fact that very few people, even in Hollywood, will even badmouth a famous director, even if it's not even to do with sex, just to say this director's a hack, or this it was a terrible experience to work with.
They're devastated. They're really, really devastated. Like a lot of my friends and people very close to me, they've gone to university for years, 3 years for the degree, another year for masters, etc. They've invested their livelihood into this career. We love to nurse. That's what we're here to do, and that's being taken away from them. And regardless of everything that they've put into it, it's now being taken away from them. And yeah, my closest friend, she got her deadline for the November the 16th is when she will be fired, basically. So she's now scrambling, she's had a baby, she's got a young family, so she's scrambling together thinking, well, where do I go next? And knowing that it's going to be introduced to the NHS,
That is the goal. There's this massive segment of our population. Most people are kind of in this middle space where they're looking to run a small business. They're looking to have a stable care of their families, to create some kind of, nest egg to pass on to their children and do the best that they can to raise good children in schools and, with values and all of that. But as you said, when these regulations come in and out, to shut them down, to require them to enforce things they may not agree with, to remove their jobs from them or force them into taking experimental drugs in order to participate in mainstream economy, or at least make it appear that way for now, it's highly demoralizing and demotivating. And the power always is in us coming together and us realizing how many of us are not okay with this and how many of us would be willing to do something about it if we felt there was hope. But when so much of our communication and so much of what we perceive of reality is being filtered by an algorithm, that's more difficult, right? Like, you have your alternative platform here. I have to censor myself in certain ways and create, other platforms to communicate things or use code words and all of this to be able to navigate it. So when we shut down that communication, it's very challenging and it's very difficult. I don't see it as a bleak reality, but it can appear that way to most people. And isolation has been a huge part of this cult movement to really break people down. If you look at the protocols of how to create a cult, of how to create mass mind control, one of the huge factors in that is controlling communication of information and isolation.
But when I came back to Denmark after living in Spain, actually it just really pulled me when our minister at her New Year's speech 1.5 years ago said that she wants to force remove 50,000 Danish children. And Denmark is a very small country. We're only around 6 million people. And in the last 10, 20 years, there have been around 24,000 children removed from their home, a lot of them by the choice of the parents themselves. But suddenly, 1.5 years ago, out of the blue, our minister, Mette Frederiksen, loudly is expressing that she wants now to force remove 50,000 Danish children. And that just sounded so crazy that I think that no Danish people could take it seriously, because where did she get that number from?
It's not being shown on the media that there's many, many nurses taking early retirement, that are going on sick with the stress, that leaving the frontline physical job of nursing and taking a backseat into nursing, such as the PIP assessor role, which is, you can work from home to do that. That's not hands-on nursing. So they're losing a lot of the frontline workers, and you're seeing this influx of young support workers, carers, people that may not be in it the right reasons. There may well be, but you're seeing this massive turnaround of staff in care homes, NHS, it's agency, and these people, they don't know the patient. They don't have time long enough to gather the rapport, to care for them properly. So you're also seeing not just a reduction in staff, you're seeing a reduction in the quality of care as well for these people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, care homes are about, it's not about just keeping people alive, is it? It's about giving them a life in their final years. And I remember when we used to go to my granddad's home when he was still with us, you built up a rapport. Even when you went to visit, you built up a rapport with nurses, and they used to joke and have banter with the residents that they got to know well, and they knew their families, they knew their life stories. And if you just have sort of locums going in for a week or two here, a week or two there, you're not going to have that. It's basically going to be feed, toilet, bed, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. They don't really necessarily care, and rapport and getting to know the individual is so important. It's so important to them to feel that they are being cared for. It's so important to feel loved.
Well, there's been an exponential growth in membership of the union, which started as a small independent trade union, which is generic. We had anyone from cleaners in Asda to university professors. But recently, for reasons that we all know about, there's been a dramatic increase in membership from the care home sector. And these are people who are joining not just for the way that people normally join a union, just in case they may need it at some point or other. These are people who need urgent representation.
So why is that then? Are the unions not, I'm assuming you're talking about the mandatory vaccine deadline which is coming down for care home staff. So are other unions, they're not representing staff, other unions aren't?
No, this has been really quite troubling for people to find that they've been paying their monthly dues to the likes of Unison or Unite for years, if not decades, for most of their career, and then find that when they really need help, the unions are on the other side. They're no better than a chocolate fireguard. They support the vaccination program. They support this no jab, no job policy.
I did this as a series. Initially it was a documentary, right? It was going to be like 3 hours at some point. I just said, man, this is too much information for anyone to sit down and watch. So let's break it up into these 30-minute chunks that are like almost like a game, like levels, in a video game where you can go level by level and start to deconstruct your understanding of reality. And I think in a way, this is the most important time period for a docuseries like this, because ultimately it's about control, right? The series is about who controls your reality, from the level of mind control to the sexual, perversions and corruption, to then, the nature of the cabal and how they interlink essentially between politics and finance and intelligence. I mean, you start to see based on certain cases, you get to see how the web works and how it gets really weird. But again, based in enough evidence and, cases that are real enough that I think people can follow it and ultimately get to the final levels where we start talking about the multidimensional nature. And this is why the ancients talked about demons, right? They talked about archons, right? These sort of controlling entities that are, we get into it in the final chapter, but essentially manipulating our reality. And so that's why I say from the beginning, it's like this story is ultimately about the energetic feeding on humans. And that feeding takes place at every level. And that's what we want to go through, is to get people to that realization, how we are being manipulated, fooled, fed upon.
People want freedom. And with freedom comes independence. And people really need to take a hold of their health now. People really need to look after themselves. It's all about prevention over cure now. And it's like myself, I've been doing health checks on people that I know that don't want to go to the doctors. They need the blood pressure checking, blood glucose, BMI. You know, I do a lot of Ayurvedic healing, so I mix kind of the old with the new, and do more natural ways of healing. But you know, we're still 3D beings. We still have to look after our physical health. So yeah, me as an individual and as a nurse and a healer, I do call out to people, you know, I am here. I'm still a nurse, I'm a healer, and I'm here to serve the people if they should need me. And I think down the line, in maybe the years to come, maybe a few months to come, they will be crying out for us, yeah, and everyone's going to have to step up.
There's such a split in that. There's such a divergence in that. There's a large segment of the population, definitely a vast majority of people feeling less who are feeling probably less connected to some type of direction or some type of purpose and aim in their lives. And we've seen things here in the States that I'm sure you guys have experienced as well with this pandemic, where people are being incentivized to not be working right now, and where there were a ton of layoffs, and where suddenly what felt very secure for people and like they had a goal and a direction they could go in their careers and in their lives to take care of their families was pulled out from under them. So I think the vast majority of people have started to fall that way. Now, the people that I work with, they're incredibly ambitious people. I interact with a lot of people in my sphere who are not as conscious to what is happening on a global scale in the world. And those people seem to be minimally impacted by, you know, circumstances of what we're navigating right now as humanity. But the people that I work with specifically are very conscious, very aware, very awake to what's happening in the world, and they feel a strong drive to be able to step forward as leaders and to create successful businesses and the kind of wealth and income that can then be funneled back to create, you know, more of the society we want to see, to be able to retain a lot of our sovereignty and freedoms. I do see those people being strongly discouraged when they look at what's happening in the world, because it feels like there's just one wave after another of crisis, of chaos, of fear, of friends and family members and people they love succumbing to, you know, kind of this agenda that's happening, and to different kinds of, you know, fascist regulations coming in. And for them, sometimes they do feel that they're this little tiny grain of sand in a whole ocean. And what is the point? And what can I possibly do? So one of the big roles that I try to take in all of this is standing firm, standing true, standing strong in the hope that we have for humanity,